Welcome to the Make Your Brain Happy podcast, hosted by Veronique Cardone, MS, the podcast where you'll learn how to live your life to its fullest potential. This is for anyone who's interested in the science of the brain or wants to seize the power of positive thinking, enhanced mental performance, and a healthy lifestyle.
Hi, welcome to the podcast, Make Your Brain Happy. Today my guest is Shawn Hudson, and this is number 9. It's a wonderful day today in Princeton. And where do you live, Shawn?
I live in Maplewood, New Jersey.
Is the sun shining there too?
The sun is out and it's on its way to being nice and warm. The second day of spring. It's a good day.
That's a good day. So Shawn is an alumnus of the Morehouse College, a very famous one, and got his MBA at the University of Michigan. He's on the board of directors of the National Mentoring Partnership and is a contributor to the Youth About Business at Columbia and the lead program at the University of Michigan. And he's been 17 years at Pfizer after a very successful career. And I'm very proud to say that I'm the one who hired Shawn Hudson, this very talented young man at Pfizer, to lead the HIV franchise in the US, and God, we had a good time. He's now the vice president of the Pfizer Digital Organization, and is leading the Learning and Development Organization worldwide. What a responsibility. And I am so pleased to see that the person I hired, I knew had so much talent, and look where you are today. So I'm doubly excited to have you on the show today. And also, not to forget, you are the father of 2 teenage sons, Julian and Clay, and I've been following the career of your wife as well, Karen, who is also a very successful woman. So, all good things. I'm so happy for you. So before we start, I would like you to tell us something about yourself. Get us to know you.
Okay. Well, thank you for having me, first and foremost. And I guess also thank you for hiring me. I have enjoyed my time at Pfizer, and I think so much of it has to do with sort of our earliest meetings. And so before I share a bit about myself, I just have to share a story about my favorite story about you, Veronique. You had just hired me. And in fact, I don't think I had even officially started, but we were traveling to San Diego. And on that trip, the flight was significantly delayed because of weather. We were in the back of the plane. We were on a plane with a bunch of kids on their way to a soccer tournament. And you were trying to get some rest, and we couldn't get any rest. And you sort of came off from underneath your blanket and made everybody be quiet on the flight. And I knew right away that I was going to enjoy working for you because you showed patience as much as you could show it. But when you got to a point where your patience was not going to be the solution, you found the solution. And so I've always enjoyed that story. It reminds me so much of you in many ways. And so even after 17 years at Pfizer, that early beginning has always stuck with me about the type of leader that you were and the type of leader that you are. I've always admired you, and I'm excited to be with you today.
It's all about you today.
All right, fair enough.
Tell us something about you.
Well, something about me. And so one of the interesting things sort of about me is that I always think about myself as a learner. And so I'm excited now to sort of be in a position where I am influencing learning and development for Pfizer colleagues worldwide. But when I think about myself, there are things that I have always sort of been attracted to just because of sort of curiosity. And sort of being curious about things has led me to sort of all sorts of different adventures and wonderful experiences. And so I try to follow where my curiosity leads me, which sometimes works out great, which sometimes doesn't work out as great. But I'm always happy that I have followed my curiosity because I always get to learn. And I think that sort of collecting learning and collecting experiences just makes you a more interesting person and makes your life more interesting. And so I try to follow that framework pretty much. So if I'm curious about something, I'll try to go investigate it. Or if I learn something, then I try to share it with somebody else, especially if I think that they're going to benefit from knowing it. So that's a little bit about sort of how I see the world. You described me sort of from a sort of what I've done, sort of what I've accomplished. But one of the things that you touched on that I'm most proud of is being a husband and a father. And so I adore my wife. I met her in business school. She, very much like you, is a take charge kind of a person, but does so in a way that brings other people along. Together, we have two wonderful sons. And it's been a great week in the Hudson household as my older son is a senior in high school and continues to sort of work through the college admissions process. And so he has heard from nearly all of his schools right now. So I'm just excited that he will have a broad range of choice for the school that he ultimately picks. So
does he
super excited.
Does he have a preference for Morehouse like his father?
He says he does, and I hope that is the case. If Julian were to attend Morehouse, he would be the 8th person in our family to attend Morehouse.
Oh.
So I'm hopeful that he will. But one of the things that I committed myself to doing is making it his choice. My family did not pressure me into going to Morehouse. They gave me the opportunity. And so I want to make sure that he has the opportunity to pursue whatever his interests are. And so if it turns out to be Morehouse, I'll be happy. If it turns out to be Oberlin or the New School or the Berklee School of Music or some of the other places that he's been admitted, my ultimate happiness is if he chooses and if it's his choice. So we'll see.
Good father.
Fingers crossed. Fingers crossed.
I let my girls choose where they wanted to go because it's one way also to teach them this is your first big decision.
Totally agree.
So I'm glad you're speaking about your sons, and I see the pictures on Facebook, and they are as handsome as their daddy and their mom.
Oh, they all after their mother. After their mother. So
let's talk about the elephant in the room now, the big elephant. And
sure.
In fact, no pun intended here, in the U.S., which is what's going on now. Black Lives Matter, voter suppression. I mean, I was just listening to Reverend Warnock speech, his maiden speech to the Senate. And by the way, he went to Morehouse.
He's a class behind me. He's a class behind me.
I did not know that.
Yes.
Speaking about Jim Crow in reverse, politicians not willing for people to elect them, but willing to pick their voters. How do you what do you say to your two sons now with what's going on? And then on top of it, now we had this, Asian, we have this Asian hate crime spree. I mean, it's terrible, all this hate in the U.S. What do you do about that?
So it's a great question and a real challenge. And so when I think about the challenge, you have to really kind of break it into many pieces. And so the first thing that I always feel when these issues when we're reminded of these issues is just the sadness. Because as a parent, one role as a parent is to be a protector, and you want to protect your children from things that will hurt them. But I guess as you mature as a parent, you realize that there are some things in the world that are going to happen that you can't protect your children from. So then you sort of move to preparedness. And so how do you prepare your children to deal with situations, to be resilient in situations, and to not lose hope? And so that's a lot of the conversation that we have been having in our household. And so I know many people have been made aware of the talk that every Black family has with their Black children, especially their Black sons. And so we've had the talk a number of times. And each time we have the talk, we have it with a little bit more context because my kids are growing up just because they're teenagers, but they're also growing up fairly quickly in the world around them. And so they are moving from an innocence and a naivete to a reality that the world isn't fair. The world isn't necessarily safe. and the world for sure isn't always kind. And so the conversations that we're having is just trying to first hear their point of view on it. Sort of, what do you feel? What do you think? How does this make you feel? What does it make you think? Because I want to make sure that in my attempt to help and to parent them, that I hear their voice first, so that I can then figure out how I can be a resource and a support to them. I can certainly share my experience, but my experience in some ways is similar, but not necessarily always relevant. When I think about my own journey, I grew up in the South. I graduated from high school 12 years after the schools were desegregated in my town. And when you are a 17 or 18-year-old, you don't really appreciate time the same way. But now that I'm an adult, I realize that that's not a lot of time between when the schools were segregated and when they weren't. And so my experience and part of my growing up was very much about trying to make sure that everybody felt connected and that there was a community. My kids are growing up in a time where division is celebrated, bipartisanship is rewarded, and extremes seem to be the only two options that are presented. And so one of the things that I try to talk to my sons about is finding their place on the continuum of what they believe and what they feel. It's not extreme left and it's not extreme right, and it doesn't necessarily have to be in the middle. And so we've been spending a lot of time trying to be critical thinkers around these issues, because everything seems to want to be wrapped up in a tweet or in just a few sentences. And most of these issues are super complex. It's like calculus. And so you have to spend some time really making sure that you know how you feel and why you feel what you feel, and also allow yourself to understand that your feelings might change over time. So in the Black Lives Matter movement, my boys have been active. My boys are creatives, and so they are using their art as an expression of their frustration. They're using their art to share and register their protest, and they're using their voices. And so, and I know that because they were active over the summer with Black Lives Marches Matters and sort of being a part of rally protests. It was certainly a theme that has come through my son's college applications essays. But even in light of the recent challenges with the violence against Asians, my son wrote a beautiful post on social media, sort of really challenging us all, not just to post empathy on social media and do nothing, but to be active in real time. And so that was my reminder, or I guess my ability to know that what we've been talking about, what we've been teaching is actually landing, and that he's shaping his own thoughts. And so I just gave him a big hug and told him how proud I am of him, because that's his voice. It's not him parroting what he's heard us say. It's not him, reposting something else that someone else wrote. It's him in his own words, expressing frustration, but also doing something I think is most important. Holding everyone accountable.
Have you noticed organizations or groups of young people working together? Because I'm going to share a story that I'm very proud of. My youngest daughter is a resident psychiatrist at UPMC in Pittsburgh, and she's extremely active for social justice, equality, voting rights. And with a couple of friends, they created an organization, a nonprofit that's called Bakers for Change, because her passion is baking, and she's an amazing baker. So they create all those delicious treats, but the decoration is very often vote or Black Lives Matter, or very political statements. And then they auction what they do, and all the money goes to organizations that support voting rights, Black Lives Matters, Asian Lives Matter, and so forth. So I'm very proud of her, because she's doing this on top of her job, and they are growing very fast now on Instagram and social media. They are starting to get interviewed. So awesome. Have your son started to to do something like that, or it's more a personal effort so far? I'm just curious.
They have been a part of organizations. Again, they were active over the summer, this past summer, with sort of organizations that were sort of young people organizing themselves for a march, for a rally in town, in their schools. And I think that, it's important. And so one of the things that we talked about was, this isn't a moment, this is a mission. And so you have to decide, are you making a statement in the moment, or are you prepared to be on the mission?
Yeah.
And so, because quite frankly, anybody can show empathy in a moment, and that's fine, and it's accepted and appreciated, but it's not necessarily a solution. And so what I see them doing now is learning and sort of understanding how sustained movements sort of achieve things. And so just as you share with your younger daughter's story, movements need money. They need lots of things. And so they need money, they need advocacy, they need allyship, they need a clearly articulated point of view about what the issue is that they're trying to address and resolve, and their strategies for doing it. And so I see my sons learning those component parts of movements and trying to figure out where they want to attach themselves. And so where they have shown up so far is using their art. And so my sons are musicians, and my younger son is a poet. And so I see them using their music and the poetry to sort of speak about, raising awareness for the issue. And my older son is on the student government in his school, and they have been raising monies throughout the school year to support Black-owned businesses. And so they're understanding that the awareness has to turn into action, and the action has to be to the benefit of something. And so I think that they're beginning to put the pieces together. And I think that they're also realizing that sometimes in these moments, a lot of people like the attention that they get from being a part of the organizations, but that, quite frankly, not only does it not sustain the movement, it actually can be a derailer of the movement when it becomes about ego and personality. And so they're learning these lessons. And I think that, over time, they'll be able to sort of figure out exactly where along the continuum they want to fit and how to sustain their engagement.
Congratulations. You've been an amazing parent. You still are. Now,
well, a lot of that credit goes to my wife. And so for sure, she is the primary parent. And I say that not in the sense of roles and responsibilities, but I say that in terms of impact. So she is the one who pours into our sons. And I, in my opinion, get to sort of amplify or reinforce some of the messaging and some of the teachings. She is amazing for how she thinks, how she organizes her own actions, and how she role models for our sons sort of what good looks like. And for me too, quite frankly. And so we try our best to sort of follow her guidance. But I appreciate your kind words about me as a parent, but I'd have to acknowledge as well just how amazing my wife is.
Always a team player, Shawn. Always a team player.
But always honest as well. And so that is the honest truth. Karen is outstanding as a person and for sure as a mother, and definitely as a wife.
Now you work at Pfizer, and I'm an alumni of Pfizer. So, and I always loved that company and maybe it's because it was in New York, because I felt we were ahead of our times. I remember that I was on a committee at one point, and we're talking about 2003, 2004, to give full healthcare benefits to partners, not just spouses. We looked at, healthcare support for transgender. I mean, like, we were really advanced. And I see now in Georgia, where you have all those new laws. I mean, in the US now, 250 laws have been introduced in 43 states to suppress voting rights. Yeah. And you see Coca-Cola and Home Depot standing up. And I've seen Pfizer also standing up for Black Lives Matter, for everything, for science matter as well, with all the debate around the COVID vaccine. So I think it's an interesting movement in our society. You have now corporations that are standing up. What do you think that means? Well,
I think it's critical. And so, we talked for a second about allyship. And I think that, one of the things that I've come to appreciate is, if I specifically think about, what's going on with Black people in this country, what's going on with Asian people in this country, not to overemphasize the words, but in many of these moments, we are the victims. And so it is impossible for the victim to solve the problem of being the victim. And so it is, the people who are victimizing who can solve. So they can either stop or they can be influenced to stop doing these things that are hurtful and harmful. Mm-hmm. And so when companies stand up, it's the right thing to do. It shouldn't actually require a whole lot of effort. It should just be, I think, by definition, people are innately born to know right from wrong, more times than not. And so it's just other motives that seem to take higher priority. So if you know what's right, you should just do what's right. No ifs, ands, and no buts about it. And so,
but you're talking about doing what's right because you are good at heart. You have empathy, you have compassion, and you have values. And those values are of respect for others. Not everybody is like that.
That's true, but everybody has the ability to be like that. And so when I think about corporations, to your point, and when I specifically think about corporations like Coca-Cola and Home Depot based in Atlanta, they understand incredibly well the environment that they live in. And so I think that there is, when we talk about values and sort of priorities, of course, they are for-profit companies. And so one of their values is to cultivate and create value for their shareholders. But if you think about the ways that value is created or how it's harmed, it's what the company stands for, not just what the company makes or sells. And so in the state of Georgia as a state has a huge opportunity to continue to become one of the most important economic engines in the country, if not the world. Coca-Cola is a global company. Home Depot is at least a national company. To stand with in words, but not necessarily in actions, what's going on around voter suppression isn't enough. If we just look through the lens of value, how much value do those companies extract from people of color?
Exactly.
How much value do they provide to that same community? And so saying that you are aligned with what the Chamber of Commerce says, but not using the full weight of your whole lobbying engine to change the laws is not enough. And so it is. And so I think that part of the frustration that I have and that many have is, how do we become more active and how do we create real allyship? And so allyship feels some ways to me to sort of be less than full activism. And so I can stand with you in words, but also perhaps also in my actions. And it's hard because people don't necessarily have the same interest. But to your point, if there's something around the greater good, that may be too far for some people to imagine. But even companies, there's no company that is a for-profit entity that doesn't have resources and infrastructure in place to make sure that it knows what it needs to know about its customers, knows what it needs to know about its competitors, knows what it needs to know about its operating environment. And so I just feel like
they lobby,
they lobby all day, every day for legislation that advantages them, right? And so again, if you think that people should have the right to vote, I mean, and so that is, even as I hear it coming out of my own mouth, it's absurd, right? And so 50, 60 years ago, Black people couldn't vote. That's absurd. And the fact that the Voting Rights Act has to be re-agreed to across time is absurd. The fact that in the wake of a razor-thin loss of elections, you have so many new laws being put on the books to suppress the vote. If you are the right person and you give the right message, people will vote for you. And if they don't vote for you, it's okay. You can try to run again. But to create unfair advantage so that you don't have to compete almost is a disqualifier in and of itself. And so the fact that this is okay, the fact that it is happening in plain sight, the fact that, no one or few people are crying out that this is wrong, and even the cry out, what other actions can be taken other than bringing awareness to the issue? So
you see, what the disconnect for me is that you have everywhere those, more diversity in, advertising, more diversity in the products that those companies sell, more, statements about Black Lives Matters and so forth, blah, blah, blah. And a changing society, because I see my two girls, they are in their late 30s or early 31. They were raised here, and frankly speaking, they don't see colors. You see what I mean? They are like universal, and in their belief that everybody is equal, there is no difference. But then you have a Senate and a Congress where, the HR1, the For the People Act bill, who was already passed last year in March, was passed again, but there were 234 votes in favor, but still 193 votes against.
Right.
And it's expanding voting rights, it's changing campaign finances to make them more transparent, it's limiting gerrymandering. I mean, it's a very broad, it's like what was the 1965, right? That was the big new,
right.
was it right, by Lyndon Johnson, what was it, the Voting Rights Act.
The Voting Rights Act.
Yes. So I don't understand how this, it's like there is a disconnect here between what is being said and promoted and believed, because 56% of Republicans are supporting this new act. What is going on? I mean, it's like the politicians then in Senate and in the Congress are not representing their constituencies.
Well, what I think is going on is what's always gone on, quite frankly. I think that perhaps the only thing is different today is that there's just more transparency. So if a person, were living in the civil rights era in the South, they knew their entire lives what was going on. But perhaps if you lived in New York City, it wasn't until you saw things on the national news that sort of helped you to appreciate what was going on in that part of the world or the country. But I think now we see these things, and I think what it exposes is what most people have always known, regardless of if you are, on either side of the issue. People have known what this situation, racism is a part of this country. If ands and buts, no, it's a part of this country from its very beginning. And so you can rewrite history to make it less painful. You can write history in a way that exonerates you from accountability, but it's been a part of this country since its very beginning, and no different than it is today. And so I think that we are reminded, quite frankly, of that disconnect now more than ever. And I think that the new strategy is, so if I'm caught on a hot mic, or if there's video of something happening, I can just deny it, even though there's visual or auditory evidence Because even if you see it and even if you hear it, if you don't have the power to remove me, then it doesn't matter. I'll just wait you out. And so I think with what you see with the voter suppression activity, it is a now blatant and fully visible flex of power. I am going to suppress the vote because I don't want to compete, and I dare you to do anything about it. And I think that the majority of the people are interested in their self-sustaining moments and not so much in the greater good. So there are these days less incentive to care about your community. There are fewer incentives that exist today for you to care about anybody else. The incentive framework is about me. It's about what I can earn, about what I can achieve, what I can have. And if that comes at someone else's expense, that's not, so what? That's the game that we play. And I think that
how can we change that? So, what can we do?
Well, I mean, it's a great question.
Well, we can make our kids activists already and civic.
We can, and I think
this is already one thing, but what more?
Well, you would think that in something like, a global pandemic that people would be pulled together. But I think, it seems like now in every moment where we have the opportunity to come together and to be more united, there still sort of is this competition that's created. Well, I can get a vaccine and you can't. And so there's always sort of a new process now by making it competitive and, forcing people into some form of hierarchy, me versus you. And I think one of the ways that we can begin to solve it for sure is through our children. And instead of teaching them that you could do this or you can do that, there's an opportunity to encourage them to go get the point of view of someone who thinks differently from you. Not to have an argument, but to really try to understand how do we get back to thoughtful compromise? Like, let's debate it, but let's sort of agree on some ground rules of facts, not opinions, and sort of teach our children to be critical thinkers and to have heart. Because for sure, no matter what in life, something unfortunate is likely going to happen to everyone. And so you're going to need someone to help you out. And so I think teaching them to acknowledge that we can't just exist in the world on our own or pretend that we're existing in the world on our own, that the way that we overcome challenges, the way that we enjoy successes is most likely because of the help of someone else. And so I refer to my wife as the primary parent. So the success that our kids enjoy recognizes that, there are people who are sacrificing on their behalf. And I think that that's the way that we can move forward as a country is, again, companies who have resources and influence have to sort of see that there's more in it for them than short-term profit or even short-term loss. But the opportunity to make, if those companies made Georgia a haven of, real sort of equity, then more companies and more people will want to come work there.
Yes.
They would have more customers, but their choice to sort of write their support instead of show their support in true actions misses the point. And so I think that we have to challenge ourselves in all of the ways that we identify and show up is to sort of use whatever platform we have to promote togetherness, to promote, the opportunity that is bigger than us, that benefits more than just us. So when I show up at work at Pfizer, or when I show up on a board, mentor focused on trying to empower young people, it's about the greater good. And I get so much satisfaction out of that. Like, I get a lot of joy out of that by helping other people get to a level of satisfaction. You hiring me wasn't about you. It wasn't even about Pfizer. It became to the benefit of Pfizer. It became the benefit of you, but it was a real transaction, right? So you and I connected on a philosophy of how we thought we might be able to be successful together. And we together benefited the company. We for sure benefited patients, and we benefited each other. I think that these triple wins are around us all the time. It's just how we choose to show up in whatever role and responsibility that we have, that we make it not about ourselves, but we make it about mutual benefit and the benefit to others.
So what would you like to see happen now in the US? Like, for HR1 to be voted, we would have to go through, a point where there would be no filibuster on voting this. The famous filibuster that has been used over and over again. And was created to provide balance and to provide partnership and working together in the Senate, but has been used no more like to block. So we need to do something as a society to make it more just, to make it more viable on the long term, equal. So I'm wondering what's going to happen at the Senate level, if
Yeah. So it's a great question. So I'm not sure what will happen. My guess is not much different than what we're experiencing today, because I think that even though we can aspire to a different moment, and we can talk about sort of greater good and the benefits to society, we have to sort of accept that that's not the prevailing philosophy today. And so I think that, quite frankly, the mechanism of politics has to be organized in a way that more people then first see the benefit of what it gets them to vote the quote unquote right way. So what is the incentive for them to, even if it's not in their heart, to vote this in a way that benefits them? And then allow them to see that even though we had to organize it in a way for many people to sort of see personal benefit and personal gain, then reflect on what it did for society.
Yeah, they did it. They did it in '65, which was right. They were able to do it. They came together to do it. So why can't they come together? This is awful.
Well, I think that it was '65 was a groundswell of these things can't continue to happen.
Yes.
It's too much. It's too much for the human psyche, and I think it also took the will of someone. And so I read a book years ago that sort of described the relationship between LBJ and Martin Luther King. They didn't necessarily like each other, but they understood that they needed to work together to get what they both wanted. And so King wanted, civil rights acts and voting rights acts passed. LBJ wanted to be the president of the United States. And so, people, I think that maybe that's the formula, is that it's totally okay and it's reasonable to expect that people don't sort of have the same points of view, but finding common ground is a real opportunity. And so what I think what could or should happen is that we need the might of whoever has more power in this moment to use that power to do the right thing. And so LBJ was not popular, but he had the ability to whip the vote, and he was the president. So the Voting Rights Act and the Civil Rights Act passed under his leadership. And so I think that you just have to sort of use the mechanisms of power that are in place today to force the right decision and try to make them permanent. And so the use of executive orders is not.
It keeps on. This is the frustration. You think
because it's
progress, and then you go backward. One step ahead, two steps backward. So it's very frustrating. And I'm talking for.
And I think that the other thing.
I know that, so I know I'm.
No, but I think that the other thing that I think about is that typically in this country we thought about power in two predominant ways: economic power and political power. And I think that, unfortunately in this moment, and perhaps for sure for our kids, their trust and reliance in political power is lessening day on day.
Yeah.
And so the way that you described how your daughter is being an activist, she's doing it through economic means. Because I do think at the end of the day, political power is second to economic power. And so campaign financing is such a challenge because people recognize that the only way to become an elected official is to either have an exorbitant amount of money or to raise an exorbitant amount of money. And so I think that perhaps the other way that we can begin to solve this problem if businesses, large, medium, and small, start using their economic resources to make a difference. And so there are, activist companies who are beginning to shape, the way that we think about things. And so we've referred to social media. We're using technology to be connected right now. And so when you start thinking about what's really driving the wheels of change in the world, technology is one of them. And so what are technology companies going to do with all of the power that they wield over our lives? How are they going to use their resources?
We haven't even spoken about Google and Facebook.
Google and Facebook and how they are bending opinion and, making them into alleged facts. And so that's an accountability opportunity. So while they're making billions and billions of dollars, how are they using those resources? What are they using it for? But even not those huge tech giants, how are each of us, how are we using our own finances? How are we using our own resources? So who are we supporting? Who are we enabling? What are we trying to make happen? Are we active, in even local politics? Are we, do we care about what's going on in the schools? Do we care about equity for all children? What safeguards are we demanding even in the towns that we live in so that people have, fair and unfettered access to opportunity? So I think that, again, it's easy to imagine what Google and Apple and Facebook should be doing, but we have to also challenge ourselves. Well, what are we doing? Like, what am I doing? What am I going to do on Sunday afternoon? I have the choice to watch basketball and do nothing, or I have the choice to sort of use my time and my resources for something that's not just going to be to my own benefit. And I think that, when it comes down to it, it's a personal action, right? And so we always have the choice to talk about it. We always have the choice to do nothing about it. And I think that the real acts of change are going to be at an individual level that become more of a collective, that becomes a movement. Like, so if I don't choose to do anything ever other than just sort of repost on social media, awareness of the problem doesn't solve the problem. Strategies and solutions solve problems. And so awareness is important, but is perhaps just the first step in managing an issue.
So I think this is the right conclusion to our amazing conversation, Shawn. It's like, just don't limit yourself to posting your opinion. You're right. It's just like do something about it. And even if it's a small step, one engagement in a local organization or giving money or whatever. But you're right. The only way we're going to change this is if we all do something on our own. I mean, like collectively, but also, taking the first step.
Right.
So thank you so much for sharing your time with me on a Sunday.
Of
And
course.
I wish you continued success, and certainly you have inspired with your wife two amazing young men who I hope maybe one day will be in the Senate, and help us continue to change this country. So thank you so much, Shawn, for being on the Make Your Brain Happy and podcast. And people say, well, how does it make your brain happy? Well, my point of view is that I cannot be happy if not everyone is happy around me. And that's my philosophy, is that you cannot live in your bubble and ignore what's going on around you and say it's fine. So I think we deserve a collective happiness, which in fact is written in the Constitution in the US, the right to be happy. So
I thank you for the opportunity, and Veronique, just to sort of make sure that we bring this full circle. You had a choice in who you would hire to be one of your direct reports, and you chose me. And your choice, has had a profound impact on me and my ability to make impact on others. And so I very much appreciate you using your choice and giving it to me. But I also use it as, again, a role model and an example of that. Well, that's what I'm supposed to be doing as well. In fact, that's what we are all supposed to be doing. So thank you for this opportunity to sort of share thoughts. It's always great to connect with you. You are, in fact, one of my favorite peoples. I'm proud of all the stuff that you're doing. I was proud on the airplane to San Diego, and I'm proud now. I remember your daughters coming into the office when they were little girls, and now I can't imagine that you are now a grandmother. Your daughters, well, I knew that they would be successful because they were always amazing, even as children. So congratulations to us.
Congratulations.
And so I think that's what it's all about.
And I want to have the final word.
You may.
I hired you because you were the most talented and the smartest of all the people I interviewed, Shawn. That's it. That's why I hired you. And it was a great decision. Have a wonderful day.
You too.
Thank you for joining us for the Make Your Brain Happy podcast. This episode was recorded by Veronique Cardone and produced by HG Media. If you enjoy our podcast, please share it with your friends. You can find our podcast on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, and wherever you listen to podcasts.